I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Lane.
Sir. Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere?
Hello. Why all these cups? And why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen.
I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Please don't touch cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the
No,
time.
it's quite a different matter. She is my aunt.
Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is,
Well, you
too.
need not eat as if you're going to eat it all.
You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Oh, why do you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, nonsense.
And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear out the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily?
I don't know anyone of the name. This was found in the smoking room the last time you dined here.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? Well, I wish to goodness you'd let me know. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up. However, now I look at the inscription inside, I see that the thing isn't yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't read. More than half of modern culture is based on what one shouldn't read.
Now, I want my cigarette case back.
But this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Now, just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt who lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
Good heavens, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Surely that is a matter which an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. Now, for heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette
Yes, but
case.
why does your aunt call you her uncle?
From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being small. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be? She called her own nephew her uncle. I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You've always told me it was Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards, Mr. Ernest Worthing, B40 Albany.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country. The cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Go on, tell me the whole thing. I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a
I'll
Bunburyist?
explain to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you're kind enough to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Now produce your explanation and pray make it improbable.
My dear fellow, he's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who always addresses me as uncle from motives of respect, which you would not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited.
Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algy, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. Now, that is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is really pure and never simple. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite frightened to say you were a Bunburyist. You are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
Now, what on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've been really engaged for Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
Well, I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know, you're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You'd much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. I know perfectly well that you place me next Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, naturally, I want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecil is a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. And I strongly advise you to do the same with your invalid friend, who has that absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury.
Oh, nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
Now, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you can have the opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not daft. It would leave no room for future developments. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, dear Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't seen her since her poor husband died. I never seen a woman so changed. She looks quite 40 years younger. Now I would like a cup of tea and some of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta. Good heavens. Plain, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with dear Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause? I, of course, cannot say. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. Such a nice woman, so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
Oh, I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs.
The fact is, I've just had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think that I should be with him.
Very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, I think it's high time Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he's going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the matter is absurd. Health is a primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle. We never seem to take much notice. I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, not to have a relapse on Saturday, because I rely on you to arrange my music for me.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. Now I'll run over the program of music that I've planned, if you'll kindly come to the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon, and I'm sure the program will be delightful, after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe, is so.
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite sure that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would strongly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I first met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met. Since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something about that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Ernest.
Well, yes, I know it is, but well, supposing it was something else.
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation.
Personally, darling, I don't think the name Ernest suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I must say I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think that, Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? Oh, no. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. No, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. Oh, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It's hardly a matter she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to ask you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma!
Gwendolen, the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, though I have the same list the dear Duchess of Bolton has. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. How old are you?
35.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. touch it, and the bloom is gone. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
No, in investments chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a pleasure or a profit. Gives one position, but prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I have a house in the country with some land, of course, attached to it, about, 1,500 acres.
How many bedrooms? Well, that point could be cleared up later. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoilt nature like Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year.
What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I knew there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the size?
Both, if necessary, I presume. Now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth.
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, a very kindly gentleman of a charitable disposition, he found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag. Yes, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles on it. Ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. Yeah, it was given to him in exchange for his own.
Cloakroom in Victoria Station?
Yes. The Brighton line.
The line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you've just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life, which remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As to the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom in a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, but it could hardly be regarded as a recognized position in good society.
Well, may I ask then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say that I will do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, to make a definite effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I can possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at a moment's notice. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady
Me, sir? And what is it to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I or Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
For goodness sake, Archie, don't play that ghastly tune.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say that Gwendolen refused you?
Oh, as far as she's concerned, we're engaged, but our mother is perfectly unbearable. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother in about 150 years' time, do you, Algie?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased. By the way, did you tell Gwendolen the truth about you being Earnest and dying Jack of the country?
My dear fellow, the truth is not quite the sort of thing that one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. Before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of Ernest. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy.
That's hereditary, my dear fellow. You better say severe chill.
Oh, very well, then a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother, Ernest. Won't you feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's all right. Cecily's not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes for long walks, and look, pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolen and Cecily are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. I will bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we're to get a good table at Willis's, we must really go and dress. You know it's nearly 7.
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
I'm hungry.
I've never known you when you weren't.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolen.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unteasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thank you. I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunburying.
Yes, sir.
You can lay out my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits. I shall probably not be back till Monday.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow's a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
Cecily! Cecily!
Cecily, your intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is for you to improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious, I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and I know of no one who has a higher sense of responsibility and duty.
I suppose that is why he so often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish he would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence on him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would. You know German and geology. And thinks of that kind influence a man very much.
Oh, I doubt if even I could produce an effect upon a character so irretrievably weak and vacillating. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really can't think why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, that is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened. and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Oh, do not speak slightingly about the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in younger days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I speak in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble. Oh, this is indeed a pleasure.
How are we? How are we? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good if she could have a short stroll in the garden with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. But I mustn't detain you any longer. I'll see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think I will take a little stroll with you, dear doctor. I find I have an headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure.
Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station, miss. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, D4, the Albany West. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. He said he particularly wished to speak to you privately for a moment.
Pray ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he will look just like everybody else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now you've mentioned the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't think why you were here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go out to town by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
I see. I still think you'd better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Maréchal Niel?
I'd rather have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think you should talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
You're the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I should care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Oh, thank you. You're too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married.
The precept, as well as the practice of the primitive church, was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously why the primitive church hasn't lasted. By persistently remaining single, man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray. Mr. Worthing.
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful deaths and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure. Dead. Your brother Ernest, dead. Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust you will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it's a sad, sad blow.
Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad. In Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so he shall reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. We are none of us perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? That hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You would, no doubt, wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the man in the wilderness can be adapted to any occasion, joyful or distressing. I have featured it as harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right? Well, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the poorer classes about it. They don't seem to know what thrift is.
Is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, it is not for any child, dear doctor. No. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself. Yes. This afternoon, if you've got nothing better to do. I don't know if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and, indeed, immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed, I think, advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Well, I might trot round about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at that time.
Oh.
A case of twins that occurred recently in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins, the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see any point in being christened along with other babies. That would be childish. Well, how past 5 do?
Admirably.
you have got on. Do go and change them.
My child, my child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do be happy. I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is here? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother Ernest.
Oh, nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, Uncle Jack, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. You will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've given you and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me all about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. Surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
He's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, Ernest has been telling me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I admit that the faults were all on my side, but I must say I expected a more enthusiastic welcome than this, considering this is the first time I've been here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never?
Never, never, never.
Well, it's the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we should leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is quite over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
I feel very happy.
Algy, you must get out of this place as soon as possible. I do not allow any Bunburying here.
I have placed Mr. Ernest's luggage in the room next to yours, sir.
His luggage?
3 portmanteau, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
There you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town, too.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why don't you go out and change? It's childish to be in deep mourning for someone who's actually staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week. You have got to leave, and by the 4:05 train.
I'm certainly not going to leave you whilst you're in mourning. It'd be most unfriendly.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never knew anyone who took so long to dress and with such little result.
At any rate, it's better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I'm occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it's been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily. And that is everything.
Oh, I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's going to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
I would give anything to have a look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is merely a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You may go on. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily.
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying until next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle, I finally accepted you in this dear little arbor. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and this is the little bangle with the true lover's knot that I promised you always to wear.
Did I get you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, besides, of course. There's the question of your name. You must not laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
My dear child, you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what other name?
Well, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Oh, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it's rather an aristocratic name. Half the chaps who get in the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. Cecily, if my name was Algy, couldn't you love me?
I might admire you, Ernest. I might respect your character. But I fear I could not give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes?
I must see him at once on a most important christening.
Oh.
I mean, on most important business.
Considering that we have been engaged since the 14th of February, and that I only met you today for the first time, I think it is rather hard that you should leave me for so long a period. It's half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has called to see Mr. Worthing, miss, on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in the library?
He was seen going in the direction of the rectory some time ago, miss.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. No doubt one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much, after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Cecily, Mamma whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some elderly female relative of advanced years resides here also.
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes. I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange that he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. I am not sure that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. Oh, I am very fond of you, Cicely. I have liked you ever since I met you, but I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do. I always think when one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cicely, now that I know that you're Ernest's ward, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than usually plain for your age.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
But it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never told me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. Cicely, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should keep it a secret from you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cicely, I feel there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the very latest.
I think you must be under some slight misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. Well, if you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cicely, if it causes you any disappointment. But I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it should cause you any physical or mental anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the dear boy has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall regard it as my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion like this, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there a great many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills nearby, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden, this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London. May I offer you tea?
Detestable girl, but I require tea. Thank you.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And though I asked you most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing upon your valuable time. And no doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Well, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some mistake, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is at present embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced upon us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet, wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you?
There is just one question I should like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both of us engaged to be married to your brother Ernest. And so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I have ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly, I have no brother Ernest. I never had a brother in my life, and I certainly have not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never. Not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, dear Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They'd hardly venture to come after us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Well, this ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is, too. The most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my
How
life.
you can sit there calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble, I do not know.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cup.
I say it perfectly heartless. You're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm unhappy, eating is the only thing that consoles me.
Well, that's no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
I wish you'd have tea cake. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man can eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Oh, Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. Besides, I just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:30. And I will naturally take the name of Ernest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We can't both be christened, Ernest. It's absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence that I've ever been christened at all by anybody. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so I know my constitution can stand it. But I must say, I think it rather unwise. You're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making the most wonderful improvements and things.
That is nonsense. You are always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth, then, do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas do you have of hospitality?
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there is still 1 muffin left.
The fact that they did not at once follow us into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They are looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity for meeting you.
That certainly seems to be a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town as often as possible to see me?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. That explanation seemed to be most satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth on it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrieff has said.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which one of us should speak to them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names, is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are prepared to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk about the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Good heavens.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing.
Come here. Sit down immediately. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once on a luggage train. You must clearly understand, sir, that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately, from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady
You are
Bracknell.
nothing of the sort, sir. Now as regards Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Oh, I killed him this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage?
I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So Bunbury died.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. Well, now that we finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, Mr. Worthing, may I ask, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there's anything peculiarly exciting about the air in this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seem to me to be considerably above the average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew in any way connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely require information.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest 1. Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. So far, I'm satisfied.
How very kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles. Both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with interest, I see, but somewhat too exciting for a young girl. I'm not myself in favor of premature experience. Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that's all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So nice to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Come over here, dear. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. We can soon alter all that. Now, turn round, sweet child. No, the side view is what I want. The chin a little higher, dear. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the dearest, sweetest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for one moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon. I'm not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out about each other's characters before marriage. That, I think, is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more could one desire?
The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I do not approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? Impossible.
This afternoon, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he succeeded, in the course of the afternoon, of absconding with my only ward, Miss Cecily Cardew. He also stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
That is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is irrevocable. I decline to give my consent.
Come here, dear. How old are you?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
Well, it will not be very long before you are of age, so I do not think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you again, but it's only fair to point out that according to her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
Well, that does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest class who of their own free will have remained 35 for years. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be still more attractive at the age you mentioned. There'll be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt instinctively that you could. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate to be kept waiting even 5 minutes for anyone. And waiting even to be married is quite out of the question.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I'm bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be well aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny that I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, I have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir, is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed the desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he knew that this was the way you were wasting your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon? I don't think that as things are now, it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble. It grieves me to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell.
Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultured of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It's obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam. Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has for the last 3 years been Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told that you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism. Where is that baby? 34 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator containing a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, the perambulator was discovered standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did, but the plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day forever branded in my memory, I had with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria! The Brighton line.
Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you for the rest of my life.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag? Now, examine it carefully before you speak.
It seems the same. Yes, there is a stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage in younger and happier days. And here on the locker, my initials. I'd quite forgotten that in a moment of extravagance, I'd had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it so unexpectedly returned to me. It's been a great inconvenience doing without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is returned to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes. Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I'm unmarried.
Unmarried? Oh, I do not deny this is a serious blow, but... Well, after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to appear inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cicely, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Algy, you young scoundrel, you'll have to treat me with more respect in future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best, though I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Oh, good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I never change, except in my affections.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, at the time Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on
And what
you.
name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Well, being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot for the moment recall what the General's Christian name was. I've no doubt he had one.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period. I suppose the army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful volumes should have been my constant study. M. Generals. Ah! Malum, Maxbow, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Moncrieff. Lieutenant, 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, General, 1896. Christian names. Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest, after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
My own one. I knew from the first you could have no other name.
Oh, dear Gwendolen. It's a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia.
Frederick, at last.
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolen, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I have now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.